Hello, everybody. This is Diana, and this is my Trailblazers of the Universe podcast. Some of you might know me from my YouTube channel, Trailblazers of the Universe, where I help you transcend your limitations and break through your barriers to live your best, most authentic life. Now we're getting into the podcasting world. In this podcast, the focus is going to be bridging spirituality with personal development and emotional healing to help you become your best version. But there'll be a lot of different things that we go into. So today I have a special guest, Morgan Rockwell. And so I have you as a spiritual mentor and healer, but also an Akashic Records practitioner. Is there any other credentials that I missed? Anything else to add?
No, that's the scope from what I work in right now. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's correct.
Yeah, awesome. So I've had some experiences getting my Akashic Record reading. I thought it was really interesting. So I guess first of all, for the people that don't know, what are the Akashic Records?
Sure. So the Akashic Records are an energetic realm of infinite possibilities. And so we can go and access the records to receive guidance, love, support on any and all areas of our life. And so for a clear example, you could go in, imagine you're having just like a hard time feeling like you're earning any money. And like every time you have money, something happens and you lose it all. You can go in and ask like, what money patterns are you carrying? You can do the same for relationships. If you're wanting to start a business, you can go in and ask some questions about what are your best steps. So they're really just a great life tool to help you figure out kind of the quick and fast way to get where you want to go.
Yeah, it's very interesting in how it and it brings up a lot of past lives too. A
Mhm.
lot of it is like karma from our past lives or patterns from there. I know when I got my reading done, we went a lot into that. So I guess my question is, what got you into the Akashic Record readings? I think it's interesting how people got into it.
Yeah, so like I love that you brought up the past life because so many people are familiar with Akashic records dealing with past life, right? So I was at this moment in my life and the records have always kind of called to me. I just, back in my teenagers and 20s, it was not like a career choice. You couldn't be an Akashic records practitioner back in that time. So I didn't ever really pursue it to the point I had other spiritual gathering practices and things. I was at this moment in my life where I was in a really unsupportive relationship and I was miserable. And it was super tricky because I was married to somebody from another country and we had two kids together. And I had no idea how I was going to get out of that situation and be all right. And the records came calling again. And it was like, that was my answer. I really needed that deep guidance and support from my own intuition and my own masters to help me move forward in this really tricky situation to make sure I was going in the aligned way that I want for my future.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think with the Akasha record also, it brings up even ancestral trauma and like
Mhm.
patterns and stuff. So even some of the things we're dealing with, it's literally like it's ingrained, from our bloodlines and everything, and how maybe we've seen our parents act, and then generations we weren't even aware of. So I think these things come up again, and how do we heal them? I think when I got my reading done too, I was aware of some of the patterns from the past, even with my family members, and I was able to like move past them, and I do believe it helped me actually work through them and even break the ancestral trauma.
Yeah,
So
I love that you brought that up also. So as I was saying, I was at this moment where I was frozen and I wanted to go forward, but like you experienced, I had to rewind backwards in order to move forward. I had to look at current patterns in this previous life or in this current life, things with that happened in that when growing up, other
yeah,
relationships, just life stuff. And then I had to go back into other lives. I had to look up my family line and see what baggage I was carrying in from my ancestors because we all have ancestral
yeah.
trauma. And they're actually starting to look at that in with some Western studies. I don't know if you've heard about the one where there was a group of rats that were a part of this study. And what they did is they gave them a little bit of a shock every time they were introduced to foods. So the rat associated shock and food. And so they measured this trauma in their nervous system. So this generation gave birth to a new generation. The new generation was not given a shock, but their nervous system registered the exact same trauma when they saw food. So
Oh, wow.
they're
Yeah.
really trying to prove how we can carry this through in our DNA. And so the records are really, really powerful to clean up that muck so you can move forward in a different way, like you experienced.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think something I also saw in the Akashic Record reading, I'm not sure if you get into that at all, but some people do like a soul retrieval. Sometimes there's like an experience in your past lives that were very traumatic and where you lost, like mine in particular, I lost like 10% of my soul. I thought that was kind of crazy to hear. I was like, what? And
Yeah.
and so she gave me some kind of like affirmation to say for 30 days and like a little ritual to get that 10% of my soul back, and it was like due to family member like trauma and stuff in this life, and it actually made sense in this life, and we don't always see it till like later on, but I think being aware of it is a big thing because it's all everything's connected, you know.
It is connected. And so many people I come across have an aspect or multiple aspects of their soul frozen through different time points. And so a past life can be 5 minutes ago or, 5,000 years ago. And like you experienced, there was some trauma where a part of your soul is frozen there. And so it's
Yeah.
really important to bring them together because a lot of people struggle feeling whole, feeling at home, feeling like they belong. And this can really play into that feeling of feeling connected in this earth, in this time, in this family with community and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think once you do that, you know, some people when they do the Akashic record readings, they when they heal that, a lot of it's like deep, like unworthiness or trauma, and then some people meet like a soul connection or a twin flame or a divine connection, like after they get something like that done. So I know that you work with. I see that a lot of your posts, you work with people that are dealing with heartbreak or looking for their like divine or counterpart or soulmate. So I guess what kind of advice would you, or I guess I should word this. How do you see that with the Akashic records? Do you work with people, help them find love, like through the Akashic record healing? I'm not saying that's like the only purpose of doing the Akashic record, but do you see that as well? That some people do because they've worked on their worthiness or their limiting beliefs around love or something or past trauma?
Yeah, worthiness is a huge one. So, what I see a lot is anything connected around love, like how we were taught to give and receive love from our parents, from our grandparents, whether it was in a romantic relationship. We tend to lose aspects of our self worth
Yeah.
and our self love along the way. So, it's one of those things you have to go back and assist somebody in uncovering where they lost that because we tend as a species to want to get into relationships to fill that void, but
Yeah.
that void is really caused by like a trauma or an unconscious pattern or a limiting belief or a false belief around love that we have. And until that's cleaned up, you're not going to find that frequency of love that we recognize as like a soulmate or a twin flame. And it's really beautiful once you start doing that healing work and people get connected to that source of love inside of them. And I love to bring them into the realm, those who are interested to meet their soul partner energy. And I just had a client last week, and it was right at her birthday, which is such a powerful time to do that because it's a new cycle. And she was just so feeling this new soul partner's energy, but there was definitely still some patterns that needed to clean up. And I had told her we need to go a little bit deeper with some of these patterns. And sure enough, she emailed me and she was like, "Oh my God, what happened? I was feeling my soul partner and then my ex came back in and it's terrible. I don't want anything to do with him. And so it was just pinpointing how when you start healing those patterns and connecting, your reality starts to shift.
Yeah, I had that experience myself. That's why I brought it up. But I also think with the frequency shift going on the planet, a lot of people are being drawn to do more of the Akashic records. I remember I just heard that I had a friend that was doing it, and I felt like guided to do it. Like it's all I needed to do for my healing, and it wasn't just in the love area. It was like in all areas, but all that's connected. And I think also it brings awareness to some of the karmic patterns you have too, even with past relationships. So I think sometimes you're dealing with letting go of like karmic partners, if you want to use that keyword,
Yeah.
and things like that, different patterns. So sometimes it can be the Akashic record reading. It's good. It brings like clarity and everything, but I think it's also showing you awareness of like what you need to let go of or your patterns and stuff. So I have a friend that he got one, and he did meet someone who I guess is his twin flame. But then it brought up a lot of inner child healing that he needed to do and things like that. So I guess it can be a double-edged sword, but overall it's for your soul's evolution. It's bringing awareness to like the patterns that need to heal. And the Akashic record, it also connects like the past, present, and future, like everything, right? So it's all, I think it's very interesting how that works.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And the thing, like you touched on, you can go in looking for, looking for things around love, but love itself has so many different frequencies.
Yeah.
And I often find them tangled with other things, like love and money are really tangled up oftentimes. Love and success are tangled up a lot because it does go back to that time when we're little, and somehow our little undeveloped brains equate love and connect it to something else that it gets entangled with through some experience we had when we were a child. And when we're 5 or 10, it made perfect sense to us. But when we're older in life and matured past that phase, it's not assisting us any longer. So going back and untangling a lot of those things really helps someone move forward. And like you said, it's not always comfortable, but it's here to assist in your soul's evolution. I've been talking about a lot about that this week. Like heartbreak is assist in your soul's evolution. Healing your heart assist in your soul's evolution. These type of things, traumatic events. And it's not a silver lining perspective. It's an actual bit that your soul has signed up for. Traumatic events can, evolve your soul as well. And so when you can get to the perspective of really suspending judgment of yourself as to why these things have happened and get really curious, curiosity tends to bring a lot of things up to the surface to be healed rather than stuck in that pattern of feeling like a victim or feeling afraid. Getting curious is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing because I think when we go into Akashic records or even past life regressions or anything, sometimes when you find out some of the things like, I'm learning to be more the observer now, like, oh my gosh, how did I do this to somebody? Or how did they do that to me? Oh my, I'm so embarrassed I did that. Or look, my family member did this to me. Like, and then, but you can see like there's a connection and you'll wonder why you have an anger towards that person in this life. And it always feels like it was something deeper. And then, but I think it just releasing the judgment. I mean, we've all made different decisions. We all have karmic lessons we're learning. And that's just sometimes focusing on one or a couple lives that are relevant, but there are also, Akashic record holds everything of every memory of every life you had. So I think it's just giving awareness to the lives you need to focus on, right? To learn the karmic lessons, to develop more. But I think some people get stuck on, I've seen some people get stuck on these readings really bad. And, but I was like, that's just one part of the whole, it's multidimensional, so just learn the lesson and then kind of go forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's such a beautiful point because every deed, thought, and action is recorded in the records. So like you're saying, there is a lot of information up there. And so you think of it in like the layers of an onion, right? It's that next lesson that's coming off, that next pattern that's ready to be released, something else that's ready to be let go so you can look deeper. And people tend to get caught in past lives like, yeah, I was a queen, I was a king. And yeah, we've all been that, but we've also all been like a prostitute or been murdered. Yeah. It has been, it's like either side of it. And the important question is not what were you, but why did you go back to that life? Yeah. What lesson did we need to learn from seeing that? Or what power are you reclaiming? Because past lives are often to get us back in touch with the power we have lost touch with.
Yeah, and that goes into the whole soul retrieval thing. I was surprised. I was like, I couldn't believe that you could lose part of your soul, but it does kind of make sense. But I don't know, when I heard that word, I was like, what? I lost 10% of my soul because of this experience?
It's wild to think about. You're like, where did I go? Where did it go?
But you know what? People that go through intense heartbreak, like you said, and everything, they do feel like part of your soul is gone. I mean, that experience, and some of the trauma you experience, even me, I dealt with addiction in the past and stuff, and I did feel like, it was like part of my soul was gone. So and I think when you get part of that soul back, you feel more authentic. You step into more like your life purpose. I know after I got my reading done, I felt, I had more direction of things I wanted to do. And I felt like more, it's hard to explain, like my old self again, like, and even a lot of inner child healing, I think was done through that. I think inner child is a big thing that a lot of people deal with, and not just this lifetime but other lifetimes as well. And I think getting into like the love frequency, the consciousness shift that's going on the planet now, everyone's heart's expanding, healing their heart chakra, and that's tough for a lot of people because we have a lot of blocks up, a lot of past trauma and grief. So what do you think for people that want to heal their heartache and don't know where to begin? Where should they even start?
And that's the thing. It's like you got to start exactly where you're at. And sometimes just going in there and seeing what is ready to come up. It's really important not to feel like, well, I should be here. I should just let go of this pain. I should just let this person go. Because that's holding yourself to a really unrealistic destination. You need to be very in acceptance about where you are and see what layer is ready to come up to be healed. Maybe it's your inner child. Maybe it has something to do with this trauma that you've been through, and you just need to kind of reconsolidate your energy. When we go through traumatic experiences, our energy field can get really kind of weak, and we can end up with like weak spots in our energy field that allow other energies to come in, and that gets really confusing. Like you said, you didn't feel like yourself until that was sort of cleaned up. You kind of felt like yourself in a different way again. So starting with the Akashic Records is a great place for healing heartbreak, because you can go in and look and see exactly what is ready to heal, to take your next step, because healing is like one step at a time.
Yeah. And I think healing, like there's some people like, or when I got the record done, I had done a lot of healing, but there are layers to it. There are levels to it, and you've done one level and that's great, but there's more that needs to be done. And I think sometimes in a spiritual community, some people, they get really down on themselves. So they'll say, oh, I thought I healed this. I should be more spiritual than this. They've done a lot of inner work, which is great. And they've stepped in their purpose. And then these things come up, right? And they really trigger you, and they bring a lot of uncomfortable emotions. But that's part of the healing. I consider it like a spiral. It's not just one. I did all this and I'm done. It's you're on this earth.
Never done.
Because
that's so
cool.
We're never done. We go back through theirs, and triggers are such good teachers. As annoying and frustrating and like irritating as they are, they're such great teachers to see. Okay, I'm triggered by this. Why? This is like really raw. I need to heal this. And I can speak in terms of my own divorce, like going through a divorce that left me a single mom in a foreign country where I could not hold a work visa, like having all of these aspects and curveballs thrown at me that I was not expecting. It's only been a year, and I am like happy. I wake up with joy and love in my heart. I'm feeling really good, but there are still layers that I go over and over, through inner child, through ancestral trauma, through this particular way that it unfolded. And there's still question marks. I don't know all the answers. I don't know why it all unfolded the way that it did, but I'm curious to learn more, because I feel that there was a greater plan, and that I know my soul chose to evolve in this particular direction. And so really being open to what that perspective is to show up assists me in waking up feeling joyful and feeling love in my heart, instead of that was my choice to feel whole and complete again, but I could be really pissed off at that still. You know what I mean? Because it's something outside of my control, but at the end of the day, it was like aspects of me made choices to get to this very point.
Yeah. And I think it is taking, responsibility for our choices, and every choice leads to a different outcome, a different reality. We could go into different timelines, parallel realities, things like that. So, but I mean, I look at it as like you made that decision, then that level of consciousness you were in. Some people beat themselves up. They say, oh, can't believe I did that. I should have done better. But if you would have. That's just where you're at the time, and it's okay to be like that. And there's always a lesson in everything, and even in our biggest heartbreak, the most suffering is where we find the most power, I think, in inspiration, and it kind of guides us to where we need to go in life. So yeah
it provides us with so much growth, and even though it's not comfortable, we really come out the other side in like a really different state, and it's really powerful.
I think a lot of things with the Akashic Record, so our relationships at love in general, right? Some people, they do a lot of healing, they're finally happy by themselves, they attract the perfect partner for them, and then sometimes we go into like, once we're with them, right, more wounds come up, more triggers, and some people find themselves self-sabotaging. They do get that the love they always wanted, or in whatever form it comes. And then it's so what do you think about that for people that struggle with, like, your brain will
Totally.
kind of try to self-sabotage to go back to the normal, what it's used to, this toxic relationships. So what advice do you have for people that like deal with that? I think it's pretty common.
Yeah. So that's an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that. And first of all, like you said, relationships are an opportunity to heal more deeply. And when we start to self-sabotage, there is typically an aspect of us that is not on board with the rest of us. It could
Mm,
be the mental aspect of our being, the emotional aspect. It could be our inner child. It's pointing out an aspect of our soul that is not completely healed from a
mm,
situation in the past. So that is a really good um, flag to be like, hey, I need to spend a little bit time looking into this. You know, you can learn about attachment styles. You can look and see what happened, that why you're wanting to revert back to this toxic pattern. Maybe it's just not broken. Maybe it's not healed. Awareness is a really good way through that. And talking with your partner, this new relationship, because you've done this work, you've obviously manifested this new love frequency. Chances are this person is willing to work with you and to help you, creating that vulnerability in a relationship and speaking, hey, I'm struggling with this. I see this. Can you assist me with this? Is also a way forward through that.
Yeah, I think communication is a big thing, and a lot of times we're taught to suppress our emotions. And even as women, I'm working on healing my feminine energy, because I think I
Mhm.
got, and especially I was living in the metro area by the DC area. A lot of women are more in the masculine. I know we want to have a balance of both, but I think a lot what I see these days, a lot of women that I talk to really struggle with being more in their feminine energy. Like, they don't feel safe in the feminine energy. They don't feel safe expressing their emotions. Maybe we've had past experiences where we've been shut down, or some kind of emotional trauma with a partner that was toxic, that didn't appreciate us or let us express ourselves, or made us feel bad, or was emotionally unavailable. So I guess what advice do we have for women that are trying to heal their feminine energy, and even if they're in a new relationship, sometimes they're still used to that pattern of being that masculine energy, and it's okay to have, some
Yeah.
masculine energy, but sometimes, like, I know me, sometimes I feel more comfortable in that. It was more like a survival mode, especially if you've been through things like addiction and trauma and stuff. It got me through that, right? So, like, sometimes it's like hard to step into the feminine energy.
Yeah, totally. And right now it's the kind of the rise of the sacred feminine. So it's
Yeah,
available to tap into this feminine energy to create this balance. And what I see a large percentage of the time, like you said, is about survival. So the
yeah,
ego aspect of our being is who keeps
yeah,
us. And so working with your ego is simply as having a conversation with your ego. You can journal it out. You can ask your ego questions. You can talk to your ego and say, hey, you know what? I so appreciate all the help you've done. You've kept me safe in a lot of situations. I'm no longer in danger. I often
yeah.
invite my ego to participate as a curious student. So that way she feels she's coming along for participating in whatever ride that I'm going on, whatever I'm doing, but she's not coming from the point of feeling threatened, like I'm not safe. Because your ego can get into kind of a loop pattern when you've come
Yeah.
through an area of living in the masculine a lot in energy, whether it be through addiction or toxic relationships, abuse, survival. And just let your ego know, you know what, we're good. We're not in survival. We're thriving. Thank you so much. And just kind of have her like take a back seat, be friends with her, but you know what? You can take a watch, but don't come from that front. And that really starts to allow that flow to come in.
And I think that's with creating, like, well, I really like what you said. I think affirmations are also powerful too. But also, and sometimes when a lot of, sometimes I've heard men say like, oh, I don't want to date another guy or something. It's like, or like, there's not a lot of polarity because the women are in the masculine and sometimes the guys will be more in the feminine energy. So it's like, I think the way we've been programmed, honestly, by society, has been done like that on purpose, so sometimes there's not a lot of polarity, and it creates a lot of frustration. And then women try to open up their feminine energy, and then maybe they're with someone that isn't really good for them, so then they close off again and step into the masculine. And then sometimes on the other side, the masculine, the men sometimes step into the other role too. Or so I think it's there's a lot of confusion, I think, with that. And I'm not really sure what the solution is, because I see a lot of people dealing with those things. And then sometimes the guys will go and close off, or the guys do express their emotions, but then they're with a woman that is a little more in the masculine, and then they feel shut down. So then it's like, then everyone closes up, and it just, I see a lot of like confusion. I've experienced this myself, so I'm not really sure what the answer is there.
I don't know what the answer is either, but I do see this, and I feel like it's almost a universal pattern. And I'm hoping as the sacred feminine energy comes in, that there's a balance that's reached, because it's, our, as a whole, we've been run by the masculine energy for quite some time now.
Yeah,
But the thing is that when women or men are seeking a partner, it's really, really important to find somebody you feel safe with,
there
because
you
that is
go.
our first
Yeah,
trigger. Not being
yeah,
with somebody to be safe
yeah.
causes us to flip out of that, because vulnerability is that feminine energy. And if you can't be vulnerable in a safe place, that's when that like really entangled thing happens and everyone's flipping from this, that, the other thing. The other thing I see is really important is getting to a place of accepting that you are just perfect the way that you are.
That's a
Oftentimes
big
people
thing. Yeah,
approach to like, well, I'll get to that when my body looks like that, or I've created much more success in my business, or I've done XYZ. Being exactly accepting the way that you are is also really, really supportive for that safe environment and that feminine and masculine balance to live.
yeah, and I think, well, society as a whole, we've been programmed to, I'm not
Mhm.
worthy, I don't look good enough, I don't
Yes.
have enough money. It's all this lack, like scarcity mentality, and not feeling worthy, and women are feeling like they have to do so much with the filters and for their beauty, and
Yeah.
it's just a lot. And then even the guys, they get the same on their end as well in a different way. So I think it's, yeah, just finding the balance. I think acceptance is a hard thing to do, and especially people who've had childhood trauma, or at our age, people have been through a lot. They
Sure.
feel jaded. Their heart chakra has like closed up, or they put a big wall up. But that's what, with all the high frequencies coming into the planet and the consciousness shift, that's what we're supposed to do: step more into the heart space, out of the
Mhm.
ego and more into the heart space, which is, it's hard for a lot of people who've been closed off for a while, and they're feeling all these things that they haven't felt in a while, and it can be a lot for people to open up when they've been like closed off for such a long time.
It is, and I think one of the quickest ways, the first step to start is allowing yourself to unplug from the collective chaos.
Yeah,
Really, really being mindful of getting off social media for a minute, like telling yourself you're unplugging, closing things off, because
that's
it's
hard for
so
me.
inundating.
Yeah,
It's really hard. It's
yeah,
really hard. I know it is. And so when you can allow yourself to really unplug from that from time to time, you're going to start to get back into that energy of like, okay, really, I'm okay to be home. I'm okay just like this. It's interesting too, living here in Europe. I mean, pressure of what you should look like and what you should earn and all of these things, it's universal. But it's totally different here. I came home last year to the States, and I was just like, wow, I forgot how intense it is, like what women should look like, what we should, you know, the ideas of what a healthy like mom should look like and what
yeah.
a man should look like and things. And I was like, oh God, I'm glad that my kids aren't growing up with that, because it's just not, it's a lot of pressure to try, and it's
It
not
is.
realistic. Like it's
Yeah.
just not realistic. And so here I feel like it's much more natural, and um I appreciate there's a seems to be a broader acceptance of body types and natural beauty. And I like that energy a lot more.
Yeah, I can imagine that. America, I think it's just, oh goodness, it just, everything's very backwards. There's always very high expectations, and I, as a woman growing up, I'm 35, but I didn't have my phone, an iPhone at that age, or social media going through puberty. It was already hard enough going through puberty, dealing with the body image issues, and like comparing yourself to other women, and being really confused. And we're going off sometimes our parents, their views, which weren't always the best either. But I can imagine coming up in this generation, with all that social media, all the filters, everything. It just, it's
I
tough.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in our day, bullying happened during, school hours, and now it's like constant. Kids, they're just access to everything all the time.
It's
People
too,
can
yeah,
reach
it's
them at
overwhelming.
any moment, and it's really overwhelming. So, like getting out in nature, getting away from that is really important to give yourself a break from all of that. And I'm a little bit older than you. I'm 42, but still checking those old patterns that flip in when you start to feel one way or another about yourself, when you start to see what a woman should look like or think, like really checking back, because those patterns growing up in our generation were pretty intense. At least they were for me. We grew up in the age of the really prime Victoria's Secret supermodel, and
Oh, yeah.
everything was like the one way look. Now there's like different body types and things like that. But still is really interesting. I took health coaching probably 4 years back, and like the average American's concept of a healthy woman was like a middle-aged white woman in like this really designer kitchen or something like that. And I thought, wow, that just doesn't leave a lot of room for what health looks like. And I find that people have a very similar, cookie cutter image of what love looks like too. A relationship should look like this. And the truth is it doesn't.
We've talked about in some of the other podcasts I do, Life Theories. We talk about sometimes the fairy tale romance, like the Disney movies. We grew up with the Disney movies to see that Prince Charming and all the perfect love story. And I think sometimes we romanticize that a little bit. And I think a big thing that's coming up with a lot of the divine connections that are going on and is unconditional love. I think a lot of people don't understand that because we've been so taught that we need to do this to get love, or we have to be this way. And I'm struggling with that myself. I think it's on a collective level. That concept is very foreign to me. The best way I could think about it is how a mother loves her child, but bringing that into a relationship, I feel like we're so used to making everything like conditional about not getting certain needs met, or about, it could be financial stuff. It could be a multitude of different reasons, or even some people think if they don't look a certain way, they're not going to get love from their partner. It's very confusing, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. What would you say to people that are trying to understand unconditional love and bring that into the relationship? I don't know the answer. So I'm learning that
this is actually why I got into it, because from like the first image that my guides gave me, and I'll never forget it, when I went through all of this, it was like that of a house burning down, and there was bits of a foundation remaining. And what the message was is you cannot rebuild anything on an old foundation.
Yeah.
And the old foundation was connected to those false beliefs, or the beliefs that were attached to whatever was destroyed, my relationship that burnt down. And so unconditional love, rebuilding this new foundation, started within me. I had to rebuild all of my internal foundations, going back and healing those concepts, those ideas, any social conditioning of what unconditional love should look like. And the Akashic records are really beautiful because you can actually experience that from the Akash, like going up and opening the records, being with my master's teachers, loved ones, the guardians. I could actually start to feel it. And I learned ways to connect that with inside of me. Because when you can rebuild this foundation, it makes you unshakable, right? So you go into a relationship that challenges you in certain ways, but you are already hooked to that source of unconditional love within
yourself. Yeah, it's inside. It's connecting to that within, not out there. But we're so programmed to look out there, and it's always out there. We're always searching out there for everything, but especially love, it's like validation. And especially if we have childhood trauma, a lot of people struggle with abandonment issues, whether that's emotional abandonment from their parents, or physical abandonment. So I don't know. I think that's a big thing with the unconditional love thing too. People think, well, this is my own parent and they abandoned me, so why wouldn't a partner who I just met, and how people change your mind all the time, that can come up. So what would your advice be for people who deal with like abandonment issues? Even if you've done a lot of inner work on stuff, it's still like a pretty deep rooted trauma. And then a lot of times you attract partners like that are emotionally unavailable, and you've made that pattern. And then when you meet somebody that is emotionally available, your nervous system is like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with this. And a lot of people self-sabotage it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see it a lot in like as terms of a runner, right? Like you can attract somebody who's going to leave you, or you will be that person in order to leave first so you don't get hurt. Abandonment is like a real deal, and it is such a deep-seated trauma, but it's one I find typically is an ancestral trauma. And so as it comes through, things in your current life trigger that. And it is like on a cellular level, this fear of being abandoned, this issue, this pattern recreating. So The best way I've found to assist people through abandonment is really going back and doing timeline cleanings, like clean the energy of the timelines, do ancestral healings, and go back as far as it can be. Because typically, if we go back 100 years or so, how our grandparents, great great grandparents, all these things, the way their relationship with structures are far different than the type of relationships we have nowadays. And so a lot of them were based on survivability, right? They weren't necessarily romantic partnerships. They were based on how are we going to survive.
Yeah.
And so, and through the depression, caused a lot of familial traumas, anything through war, depression, the different, like the Holocaust, these type of things have left such big prints on ancestral DNA that coming forward really create this abandonment in people. So it's not only cleaning up this one, this is a deep one that you really should go back and clean up ancestral stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and people don't realize that even just because it wasn't a physical abandonment, there's emotional abandonment. I felt like that with one of my parents, but I saw that his parents were the same way. They were just kind of emotionally unavailable, but it was like passed on. But I saw that their whole culture, they were like Italian, right? They just didn't really show emotion, but that passed on, and then you see they have trouble connecting with anyone on an emotional level. I've even seen that in form of narcissism, things like that. So I don't. It can be really hard, and then for people that aren't even aware that or want to do the inner work, they're just going in that pattern, that loop, and it just keeps getting passed on to their kids, and then that's how they teach their kids to cope with things, and it just it can be really tough for a lot of people. I think people get stuck on that karmic loop, and then they keep reincarnating. Or I know how you look at the whole reincarnation and everything, but it can be really hard for people to get off those loops. It takes a lot of awareness and like wanting, a lot of times, a lot of suffering, because you finally are just sick of suffering, and that's what drives people to change. But I was like, I wish there was an easier way. People didn't have to suffer so much to learn, but I guess that's part of the experience.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was working with a client the other day, and what came forward was that she had taken on this pattern of a trauma growth pattern. So her soul had picked up, inherited, brought in this pattern that in order for her to grow and evolve as a soul, it was through trauma. And so we were able to clean that up. And like you say, emotional abandonment is so big, and that is one of the first things that we do to ourselves through trauma. When we're little, we emotionally abandon ourselves, right? And so then we're looking at it in terms of other partner. There's a lot of awareness around narcissists now, which I think is really helpful, because they're like, it's a lurky, sneaky way that patterns have come about, and it's like very manipulative, and it can be very abusive. But if we aren't aware that these things exist, we can find ourselves going into a partnership with somebody who is emotionally absolutely unavailable. But we try and fix it, right? And so really looking and seeing, how are we emotionally there for ourselves? How have we chose to grow as a soul? Are we doing that through love and through support, or are we doing that through trauma? And just starting to bring awareness to those things really start to shift that.
Wow, that's a really good point, because I find myself, anyone that's been through any traumatic experience, sometimes you feel like you only grow through that, or I think that's a belief. I didn't even think about that. That's actually a really good one, because I think I have a little bit of that belief, but not everybody has to go through such extreme trauma. And when you have a belief of that, I think you're going to attract more experiences like that, because you attract right? That's part of how manifestation is like, so you're attracting that energy pattern and that belief, and it's like, then it validates what you believe, and then that you're in a loop, and that can be really hard to get out of. And thing is, and the people who there's some people that don't even believe in karmic patterns and past lives and stuff, so they're just going to keep going on a cycle, and maybe they want to heal, but they're not even open to like different possibilities. A lot of people have been very programmed or like shut off by it. So and I think with the narcissist thing, I see that the narcissist empath relationship, that's pretty common as like a trauma bond thing. I think that's very interesting, and a lot of empaths, I think, get stuck with that. They're trying to fix the person or make them feel good. Maybe they have an abandonment trauma, and then the narcissists, they had some kind of trauma too, so they'll be emotionally shut off from them, and I've seen it's a very toxic pattern. I've seen that play out.
Yeah.
That's hard
It's
to get
super
out of.
toxic.
Yeah.
It is. And it can get really like overwhelming and a wee bit depressing to think about all of these toxic bonds, right? But the thing I always tell everyone, don't forget you have free will. You have the
Yeah.
free will to say, you know what? I am not signing up for this. I am not doing this any longer. Just because it was a pattern in your family, just because it's been your past pattern, you do not have to continue it. You can be the one to break it. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, my soul signed up to break it. No, you can just say, I'm done. And then obviously there's some healing around it. But by making that statement is really, really powerful. Anybody who's in an empath as well, really learning what is yours and what is not yours is like such an important step. Listening to ways that your energy speaks to you and the ways that other people's energy comes in, because it's too confusing to walk around with everyone else's stuff.
I think that's something I've always struggled with being an empath, and I was always absorbing other people's, and now I've realized throughout my life that I absorb a lot of my parents' stuff and
Mhm.
friends, relationships, especially if you're an empath, a relationship, you're already forming a bond with them, an energetic connection, so that can be like difficult because sometimes you have these negative emotions come up, and you don't know is that mine or theirs, and then but you're feeling like it is yours, and then it just becomes it can be really heavy. So what do you think? And that can go into we can also get into codependent relationships too. So for people that are struggling that are in like codependent relationships or toxic relationships, like what do you think is the biggest reason why people find themselves in a situation like that? Do you think it's just from trauma from the past or low self-worth, or what do you think the biggest
I
reason
think
is?
it's usually a combination. Like
Yeah.
self-worth is a huge thing. We often don't feel like we're worthy of anything better, or we know we're worthy of better. We're just too afraid to know what it is. Like we much prefer the comfort of something painful than the fear of something unknown. And so it's really going back and trusting yourself. And what I see, a pattern that I see in a lot of people who stay in codependence, stay in toxic relationships, is that along the way, they have not listened to their intuition in one way or another. And they are really mad at themselves because they knew on a deep level this was not working for them and they didn't do anything about it. So there's almost feeling like they need to be there because you know what I mean? They didn't speak up. But we don't all understand how our intuition speaks to us, and that just because our intuition says this is not great for me, that's enough. Like we're not taught that that's okay to say, you know what, sorry, this isn't aligned for me. We're just taught we get in there, we want to fix it, we want to please people, we want to, you know, make this other person feel really good, but we're really at our own expense. Again, you brought up the Disney thing, but we also see a lot of the common rom-coms now that it's almost um like looked high upon to sacrifice ourselves for the needs of somebody else. And it can really be damaging if we're constantly giving ourselves away to these relationships that aren't serving us. I don't know if that fully answers your questions, but those are the patterns that I see a lot.
Yeah, and it can be tough, and I think setting boundaries is a big thing. As an empath, sometimes we feel their pain so much, or we feel what they're going through. You feel
Mhm.
bad, and then we don't speak up. We want to hurt their feelings, but when we're doing that, we kind of abandon our own selves, and we don't feel and you kind of you're giving your power away. And and there's a way to come across to set your boundaries without it doesn't have to be chaotic or toxic. I think
Right.
some people were addicted to chaos, right? And I think that's a big thing. And so sometimes you could have just resolved it in a better way or just communicate something in a more neutral way, but we're used to that chaos, so sometimes we'll bring it up in a way that's toxic or not
Mhm.
beneficial for the connection, or it's not really like solution based. It's just kind of like you're looking
Yeah.
for a reason, and it's kind of a self sabotage sometimes too, because then you're doing it in a way that maybe you subconsciously know it's going to self sabotage it because you're running away from. So it gets really complex. I see that a lot.
Yeah, but I love your notion of boundaries because I work a lot with clients to start with your self boundaries, right? So when you're setting a boundary for yourself, that means you're saying yes to something. And in order to say yes to something, you need to say no to something else. And so when you think of it in terms very simply, like imagine you want to um, have more energy. So that involves going to sleep. every night at a certain hour. You want to sleep better. And to do that, you have to say yes to going to bed at a certain time and no to binging out on Netflix until midnight or 2 a.m. or something like that. And so when you start to play with self boundaries and a yes and a no, it makes it easier to go into relationships and put those boundaries off and like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what I'm requiring. I'm going to say yes to this, and then that means I need to say no to that. And it kind of puts it on the boundaries itself and takes it off that weird of feeling of, am I hurting somebody's feelings? Am I doing the right thing?
I think it also goes in the people pleasing or people with more of abandonment issues. Sometimes they don't set boundaries because that means to them, I'm not going to receive love from that person. I'm not going to get my needs met or something. But it's actually the opposite when you continue to let things slide and not set boundaries and you know your worth and what's acceptable, what's not. Then you really do lose your sense of self. And I see when someone does that too much, the person they're with sometimes abandons them anyway because they're not being true to themselves and they're putting up with too much and like not setting boundaries and not being authentic. So it can kind of have a double-edged sword. So they think they're doing that, they'll get more love from them, but it's actually kind of the opposite. They're not being authentic and knowing their worth. And
because that person chose to be the person who, chose to be with this other person, and this other person has lost their identity. They've become just this, nebulous thing that is always trying to please them and all of this. And it's not, I don't know. A lot of partners lose respect for that because they fell in love with this other person who showed up as they were. And like you said, it loses authenticity when you're just trying to do whatever you think the other person wants. And it can really fizzle things out pretty quickly and get kind of toxic.
Yep. Be pretty complicated, but I think everything's a learning lesson, and sometimes we have to go through these experiences to teach us something. And I think another way I look at abandonment is for people who struggle with that is everybody's gonna go at some point. Your life on this earth ends, or people move on, change your mind, you become a different person. So it's just kind of accepting that and going with the flow with it, and just everything is an experience, and anyone could go at any time too for any reason. And, just having that attachment all the time, putting yourself in anxiety, it just, you have to find a way to kind of deal with that. And I think really helps to be happy on your own either way. Learning to be alone. I think that used to be hard for me in the past too. I used to not, anyone that struggles with addiction, probably you'd say they don't like being alone. Right. But once I learned to be happy with myself, I, stopped dating people for a while and just worked on myself, started healing myself. Then I attracted someone, a good person for me, not a toxic person. But a lot of people jump from relationships to relationships, trying to fill that void, and it just becomes a pattern, and you never had a chance to sit with yourself and to heal and to be aware of your patterns. You keep going in a cycle.
Yeah, well, congratulations. That's really beautiful. And it just shows when you take that pause to commit to your own growth and you commit to your own healing, like you're not abandoning yourself. And so whereas it's difficult, you're really stepping up for yourself and making that commitment. And then you are able to attract a partner who can show up and can commit to growing, and your partner can do his growing as well, and you do yours. And I think it's just such a healthier place to be when we're committed to our own growth and then the growth as a couple. Well done.
Yeah, it's tough. And it's funny, if we talk about the law of attraction and stuff, it's like sometimes when you don't want it anymore, you don't care about it anymore. It's not that you're like closed off, but you're just like, you're happy within yourself. That vibration is more attractive. That's more magnetic than, it's not always about the words you say, just the feeling. Some people, when they date people, they just give off that, or they're searching too much for love. They're not being the one, as I say, they're searching for it. And outside of themselves. And it seems like I know some people, they're constantly chasing love, looking for their soulmate, twin flame, whatever. And it's like a cycle. And then they get a little hit of love or a feeling, and then they latch onto it, and then they scare the person away.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's actually called the law of attraction, right? So we're meant to attract it. But I see so many people with this longing, this thirst, this searchability, like they're just out there, and it's repelling it in a way because you're supposed to be in a state that attracts, like you said, when you know what you want, you've set your ideas, you've set your intention, and you kind of just like move on to something else. That's what brings it in, because it's like you have this beacon going that attracts it. But when we're constantly feeding it and trying to go out and apply it, like, is that it? Is this it? Is this it? And it can it really makes you chasing a dragon in a sense. Like, it's really difficult.
And then some people will try to make it fit. Especially with this whole, I was kind of against the whole twin flame thing at first. It's not that I'm against it, I just see a lot of people, it was an unhealthy obsession. I know some people, they think everybody's their twin flame. Like, I met some, and then they try to make it fit, and then that person ends up being, I think, like a karmic or like someone toxic. And I can see how we can sometimes we do get manipulated and stuff, but I think some people are just looking for they're so desperate to find that, and they try to make it fit, but it's not a fit. And I think intuitively they know that, but it's a thing to their ego, like, oh, I was wrong, or but I can understand, because the way it's pushed out about love, everyone wants the fairy tale romance, they want to find their divine counterpart, they want to find a soulmate, whatever it is, and I can see how that can get crossed. And then especially if you have childhood trauma, abandonment issues, that can be tough. And then finding out that someone wasn't what you thought they were, or sometimes we want to bypass some of the abuse. I see that with the twin flame community a lot. There are people that are putting up with a lot of abuse on emotional and physical level, and they think it's okay because that's my twin flame, but it's and I don't even think it is a lot of the time, honestly. But it just, I see a lot of groups. I go in the groups just to kind of see what's going on, and it's like I don't know what the answer is. I can understand people want love and they really want that, but they're so focused on finding that they're not focusing on themselves, and that's why they're attracting those situations. I don't know what the answer is, because I see that a lot.
It's so intense. I have to agree with you. I think the twin flame is one of the most intense ones, and I do believe people get addicted to the story, and there's a lot of story around twin flames. And from what I know, like, having a twin flame is not as common as having soulmates, because not all souls choose to divide.
Yeah.
And when they do, twin flames aren't necessarily, like, most of the times are not the romantic fairy tale relationships. They are an actual mirror. And so it can be really confronting if you are a split soul to see your other half, because they're going to be like holding you to your agreement, more or less, of what you chose to come here and do. And it can be a really intense relationship. But I think there's almost a lot of, I don't want to say like fantasy, but I think there's a lot of fairy tale around the twin flame stories,
and they lose the purpose. Yeah, the whole point of it, and they get stuck in this. I can see how that happens.
Yeah, and so soulmates can be like anyone. They can be your best friend, they can be your child, they can be your brother, your sister, they can be your romantic partner. And there's so many different types of soulmates as well. Like, you can have a contracted soulmate where you actually have contracted to have this really profound, deep healing relationship, different things like that. And the more you evolve, the more that soulmate evolves. It's not just the one for us, right? There's a one for where we're at in this moment in time.
Yeah.
Should we choose to heal? Should we choose to evolve? Take our own growth to the next level, well, a different soul is going to be aligned with that. And that doesn't mean you're going to outgrow the person if you're with someone, because they also have their own growth agenda as well. But I feel like in order for that to come in, the more whole, solid, and complete you are, and healing that childhood trauma, or at least acknowledging it, being aware that it's there, knowing that you are reacting from trauma rather than from an authentic place, and being able to catch yourself and, calm yourself down and come back from an authentic place rather than a trauma childhood reaction, is really important. Those are all steps that you take to grow and evolve, and that's going to change what comes into your world, and really letting the story go.
I think either way, whether you're trying to attract whatever, whether it's soulmate, twin flame, I don't like getting too into the labels, honestly, because I think that throws a lot of people off, and people put this big expectation on it. But the answer either way is, well, if it's a twin flame, you split because there's so much karma, so many things you need to work on. Your whole soul had to split into two to work on it, so it's not going to be easy. You both have things that you need to work on, and it's a mirror and everything, right? But either way, the answer is, if you just work on healing and focusing on yourself, you'll attract that anyway, and you're going to have better opportunities in your life, and everything will improve when you just put the focus back on yourself. But a lot of people who have been through a lot of trauma, they're focused too much on this connection, that person, and they completely disregard all their healing or overlook that, or maybe they're trying to fix the other person, or they just get so caught up in that fairy tale that they like completely disregard themselves. And I've seen people who are relationships are in those kind of I guess patterns, and they literally look like their energy is drained from them. It's like energy vampires, and I'm like, I don't think that's your twin flame, or I don't know, it's, or you made it into some toxic, or even if it is, it could be very well be, but you've made it a toxic energy pattern, and it's going to repel them anyway. So yeah, and it's hard to give people like that advice because you don't want to be the one to like let them down, or but because some people really put a lot on that, a lot of value and a lot of importance on that, and they get really disappointed, and it's a big like soul crushing thing. So I don't know what the answer is. Like if I go in any of those twin flame groups on Facebook, if I would say anything, I would get attacked. Like I have some things I want to say sometimes, but I'm like, I should probably step back because I'm gonna like crush someone's where I'm a little more direct the way I talk sometimes. So but I'm like, oh, if they would just understand this, or but everyone has their own journey. It's also realizing that you have to step back, and that's part of what they need to learn, though. Yeah,
and it's tricky. And one advice that I give, because it is such a real thing, and it is such a deep desire of the heart to find another person in this lifetime that you can spend, a good portion of your life with. Everyone wants to find their counterpart, most everyone. One suggestion I always give: get really clear on your values of what you want in a relationship, and get really clear about your non-negotiables, and make them non-negotiables. Don't make them negotiables. And so if you have a certain way that you want to be treated, if you have a certain thing that needs to happen between the two of you, and that's your non-negotiable, stick to it. Weed it out early in the dating process. Weed it out early in the meeting process. Green flags are good, and I think we tend to look, as a society, wanting that person, we tend to look at past any red flags, and we don't really look for green flags. This is the one, right? And so really being aware, and go back to your list if you have to, like look at those values, look at those non-negotiables. Is this person really like fulfilling that aspect of what you need out of a relationship? If so, great, take it deeper. If not, let's see why not. Is there something that can be done around it? Or is it time to just say, hey, you know what? You're really wonderful. It's just not aligned with what I need in my life right now. So that person who can come in.
Yeah, I think with the longer we hold on to people that aren't meant for us, we're literally like holding, like we're not, there's no room for anyone else to come in and energetically, like they sense that, like you could literally run and go to the store, run into your divine counterpart, whatever, or social media, whatever, and then but you're still attached to this person that's not serving you. You've held on to something. It might be a karmic pattern or something, but you're literally like closing yourself off from the love that you do want and deserve. So I think what you said with the values thing, people have this long checklist of what they want someone to have, but they don't meet them themselves half the time. So you have to embody that too. It's not just about they have this big list of deal breakers checklist, but half the time I'm like, do you have any of those requirements on your own checklist? A lot of times they don't. I'm not saying it's always the case, but a lot of people don't. So you're not embodying that. How are you going to attract that if you don't embody that yourself?
Yeah. And when I'm talking about values, like qualities of a person, right? And then like make your list of qualities that you bring to the table. That's also really important. So thanks for bringing that up, because it's true. We have to be honest about what we can bring to a relationship. And it's a good exercise because, like you said, if you have this huge list of things from another person and you don't have any of those qualities, you need to get real about, wait a minute, am I looking for this person to show up to fix this for me? Or where do I meet them? Like, you have to look at it from both sides. And that also helps for manifesting, doing a little flipping of the scripts, right? Like, what do I bring to a relationship? And that gives the energetic signature of your soulmate, the notion of what you're bringing to the table, but it also gives you a really good idea if you're on the right track. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is also being authentic. When you're more authentic, you're stepping into your life purpose. Especially, a lot of people meet these kind of connections, divine connections, whatever you want to call it, when they step into their purpose more. When you're being vulnerable, when you're putting yourself out there, it might be a little uncomfortable, but you're putting your soul signature out there, and that's attracting back someone authentic for you. You know, so I think being vulnerable is a big part of it. It can be hard to be vulnerable, but the more, even being vulnerable isn't only just talking about your feelings, even just putting yourself out there, stepping your purpose, creating content, whatever it is that the person
Yeah,
does.
taking a risk, anything outside your comfort zone,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, when we've been through so much trauma in relationships, our comfort zone can get really tight, right? Like it can get really small because that's what we need in order to heal from it. And so by expanding that again can be really anything outside that's really vulnerable. Um, and just do it at a pace that works for you is the best advice that I can give. Like, don't push yourself beyond what you're ready for just because you think you should, or you get caught up in this notion like, oh, I'm not going to meet anybody any other way. You don't it doesn't have to be this really uncomfortable process. Like you're saying, if you just do that inner work and put that energy signature out, you're going to attract situations where you can meet people. You're going to attract people into your sphere of your own world. So you're not having to really throw yourself out there in like super uncomfortable ways all the time.
Yeah, I think it's like pacing yourself, and sometimes with spirit in the
Yeah.
spiritual community, we can get like addicted to like healing and doing all these things, and but
Mhm.
sometimes you need time to sit back and process all the changes that you made,
Oh
and all the
yeah.
healing, even with whether it's Reiki, whether it's Akashic record, whether it's it's like you could become. I find myself as a person that used to be an addict. Sometimes I become addicted to all these methodologies. I'm like, oh, what can I do next to heal? And that's good. It is a positive direction, but sometimes we don't give ourselves time to process. That's a lot you're going through on like a soul level, on a mental level, and sometimes we have to. I want to say step back in the feminine energy. Sometimes, like receive and process. It can be easy to
It's true.
keep.
We need
Yeah,
to integrate that, and you
integrate.
need
That's
to
the word.
integrate
Yeah.
it into your nervous system, cleaning out a lot of the like ancestral traumas and anything where you're hitting the DNA level, which when you're doing these deeper healings does, you need time to integrate. And that's a really, really great point that you made. And especially in terms of people coming off heartbreak, you need time to integrate everything you went through, everything that you're healing from, so don't jump right into another relationship because you're not going to integrate those issues before you get into another relationship. You're going to take it straight into that one.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I think pacing yourself and doing what feels natural for you as well. The only other, I guess we're getting close to an hour here. I did want to just talk about the chakras too with the Akashic record reading. So when I got, I know everybody has a different style of reading that they do, a little bit different method. But when I got mine done. She talked about some of traumatic experiences having like tears in your chakras. I had like a tear of my sacral and solar plexus from like a past life, and I think maybe that's part of the soul realignment or whatever, working with that. But she also talked about in her readings about energy centers, about how we draw a lot of our energy from certain chakras. I thought that was interesting. I don't know what your readings are like, but hers did go into that, and we went a lot into the chakras and the memories being stored in the chakras from past lives. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I do that too. I love I love the chakras. They're so powerful. At first I was like, chakras because I just thought I knew what they were all about. And then they're so amazing and so deep, and you have so many memories. You can access past lives. You can go in and heal traumas from this life, other lives. Chakras can be vibrating at different frequencies,
Yeah.
affecting how your energy is flowing throughout you. They're really, really powerful, and I love when I'm guided to take somebody into their central love column so they can see their chakras, and then we can figure out which one that they're drawn to, and we can go into the chakra. I love doing it because it's so powerful.
It's very interesting. I might have to look into a reading from you. Actually, I was thinking about that, so we can talk about it later. I guess since we've been a little over an hour now, so I guess I can close off with what can people expect? So if someone does want to book an Akashic record reading with you, or what can they expect? And we can get your info at the end. I can put that, or we can talk about
Yeah,
that.
if somebody's just interested in a general reading, I do those. I typically couple healing with a reading. So if you're wanting to ask questions around a relationship, or you're really curious about the chakra thing, we can definitely go and explore that. And I can give you, messages from your master's teachers and loved ones. You can get a reading. But healing, what is coming up, if there is an old pattern, an ancestral trauma, a past life, I love combining and working with the records that way because it's so powerful. You come out on the other side like really, really differently.
And I think a big thing about it is, you can get a reading done, and that's great, and you get all the information, but it's also what you do with it. You have to integrate it and apply what you learn. Like, I know some people give assignments, or they feel guided from spirit guides or whatever to give you some kind of affirmation or something to work on. So I think applying is the biggest thing too, and it can be tough. I mean, I think you shouldn't go and do an Akashic record reading unless you're willing to put in the work and do the healing, because you've opened up that, I guess I would say, a portal, but I don't know what you want to call it. But so now that's opportunity. It's a perfect opportunity to do healing, and it might be uncomfortable, and some of the things you might hear might not be exactly what you want to hear, but it's probably what's needed the most for your soul's growth,
It's true. It's not like a predictive reading. I give very experiential readings. You can, like you said, you can go to a psychic and they can tell you you're going to be married and live here and make this much money. But like, how do you do that, right? Like, so the way that I work with the records is getting people how to get them the next step, and then they have this experiential healing. So you can go in and experience this in a really different way, and it is. You'll know when you're ready. Like, people just know on a certain level when they're ready to go in and do this, and it really is life-changing to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you do love readings too, right? I saw that you do. So what do you do with your love readings, or what can someone expect if they wanted to get a love reading from you?
Yeah, so you can look at your love journey. You can look at, like, say you've had a relationship pattern and nothing has worked out, or every partner has had this XYZ quality. You can look at that. You can look back, you can look forward, you can look up the timelines of your family, how you were taught to give and receive love. We all have blind spots, and we all have things lurking in our unconscious mind. So you might be holding an unconscious thought, belief, or pattern around love that is not maybe sabotaging you in this lifetime, that is maybe not serving you any longer. So going in and kind of just doing this full scope of what all of the frequencies of love look like. And I always hook people into that unconditional love source within them.
Yep.
Yeah. And then if people want, you can get hooked up to your, like, authentic soul partner, their energy. You can go to a very sacred space and meet with their energy.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
I love doing that after we've kind of cleaned up all of that stuff, because it changes your frequency, and it gives people a lot of hope and a sense, and it does expedite manifesting.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds really good. I think a lot of people could really benefit from that. And for me, getting a Akashic record reading, I would recommend that to anybody. It's really powerful, but like I said, if you're willing to do the work and you have that awareness, and it's about applying what you've learned too. And so I would really recommend that to anybody. Is there anything else that you offer that you want to bring up that people can get from you besides the Akashic record or the love reading, or any other services, or is that about pretty much what you do?
I mean, it's usually just tied together with my coaching. So I do everything from like a single session to anybody who is going through like maybe a really long separation, or they've been divorced, been through a breakup. I do have like up to like a 6-month program. Typically what I find people do just like a few one-off sessions, and then they really get into the groove of understanding, because everything around love sometimes can be extremely confusing, and we might not know which direction we want to go. And once you can get a few sessions, get a few healings, and have this clearer picture, then people have a better idea of like working together in long term. But sky's the limit. I have a lot of different services available.
That's awesome. And so I mean, pretty much, and kind of the kind of work that we do, kind of you're just being intuitive. You can read off the person's energy and the Akashic record of what they need, so it could go in any direction, And I'm sure you get different experiences every time, because every person's different, has a unique experience. So it's good. I think everyone grows in the process. Yeah, it's good.
It does. I've worked with people who have struggled with addiction. I worked a lot with sexual abuse trauma.
Oh, wow.
That's can be very damaging. And then I've worked with people who just have like divorce or just not successful relationships. So it really is like all sorts of the gamut, and you just go into their energy, go into their chakras, and see what happens, or anywhere else you're guided to go. And the sky's the limit. I love the records.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then sometimes you see meditations online where they take you through the Akashic records too. They'll take you to like a library and you pick a book out. Some people can connect that way, but I think it's really good to have someone that's experienced in that. And someone had told me that you can open up different portals to past lives sometimes when you do that and they don't get closed. I've heard that. So I think it's good to have someone that's like experienced, certified, that knows what they're doing, because sometimes maybe you can tap into something that you don't have the guidance, or you might not understand it. So I think it's really helpful to have someone like you who has a good understanding. It's not just a fun like a thing. It goes very deep, and I think some people they romanticize, oh, the Akashic record, I'm getting Akashic record reading, but it's a very deep soul reading, and it's gonna bring a lot of awareness to things that you work on and healing, and some maybe more painful things that you weren't aware of. So it can really open up your eyes to a lot of that. So I think people should really, only if you're serious, get into that.
Yeah, and that's a valid point, because it's like any other energetic realm. You want to make sure you're working with the highest vibrational entity and masters and guardians. And so it does take somebody who really knows what they're doing to guide you through there. And in terms of dealing with any sort of trauma, childhood, familial, ancestral, you need to be in a very, very safe place to do that. Yeah. And so by having somebody who really knows how to guide a healing, how to really work in the records, keeps you contained in this safe place. You do not re-traumatize anything.
And grounded.
And I just can't stress that enough, because a lot of people do play around with it. And it's not that they don't do it right or they did it wrong. It's that they don't know where to look to make sure the energy is all sealed. And like you said, those doors can be open, portals can be open, energy can leak. And it can be really, really a bad experience. So just work with somebody, and it doesn't have to be me. If you're drawn to somebody else, great. Make sure you work with somebody who knows what they're doing, so you have a really beautiful, really safe, and a very healing experience.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate you being on, Morgan. And so how can people find you, whether it's a website or social media? You can list whatever you want.
My site is morganrockwell.com, and excuse the part that half of it went back to the, basic text. So it's in the process of being reconstructed again, but you can see all of my services. I do a lot of free teachings and free healings on Facebook, and my Facebook name is Morgan Rockwell 111.
Yep, and I've seen it, and I caught on to one of your lives, and it was very good. You've had some really, I like the different things you do on your lives with bringing like the love frequency in. That was very powerful. So I think that's great. Do you have anything else you want to add, or?
No, just thank you so much for having me here. It's been really wonderful. I've enjoyed our conversation quite a bit.
I really have. Yeah, it's been good, and I hope to have you on again. Now there's different topics we could talk about too. Maybe we go into like manifestation another time, or there's a lot of different areas you go into. I've been watching some of your content, so I think there's a lot of potential we could go farther with that. Okay, well, I appreciate having you on. So everybody, we are signing off this episode of my Trailblazers podcast, which is my first episode, by the way. This is our first guest on here, so it's very exciting. So make sure to follow this podcast and share if it resonates. So have a good day, everybody. Namaste.